Welcome, everyone. This is Coaching in Session, and my name is Michael Rearden, and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about purpose, setting your goals, and then so much more, because in your life, you have the opportunity to be something more than you are right now. And I know it could be a lofty goal, and it might seem like, oh, Michael, you just want everyone to be in a better place, and you want everyone to be more than what they are, and you want everyone to be happy and to know their purpose and to fulfill all their passions and desires and wishes, and you just want the world to be a better place, Michael. Is there harm in that? I want people to realize that they have the potential within them to go out and live the life that they can live rather than the life that they were given. And the life that we were given is going to be full of limits. It's going to be full of restrictions and circumstances and excuses. I want you to live in a higher frequency. I want you to live in a higher way of thinking. And it's not something easily done if you're a person who just thinks in that singular mentality. I'm only thinking this way. This is my circumstance. This is my life. This is the path that I'm on. This is all I can do. But is it really all you can do? Some people are going to say that's all they can do, and that's the life that they're going to have, the life that they gave themselves. But what happens if you want to give yourself something more than the life that you're going to give yourself? Because the world's going to give you a life, and you have the opportunity to choose to take it or to choose to get something else. We have that power. We have that responsibility to make the right choice. Some people are going to just take the easy road and say, well, the world's doing this, it's pushing me this way. It might not be exactly where I want to, but it's good enough. Our comfort zone is going to be one of the most dangerous places that we can stay, even though it feels right, even though it feels comfortable, it feels good. But the problem is a lot of people, they want this life that's different than what they have, but they're not willing to do the things necessary to get that. They're not willing to listen to a podcast on personal development rather than watching a funny video of a dog running in a circle for the 15th time. Yes, you're going to laugh. You're going to love it. You're going to say, oh, look at the dog. It's so silly. It's crazy. But are you doing something that's going to help you in the future? Yeah, it's going to help you in the moment. You feel good laughing, and your brain is giving you all these chemical responses. Oh, you're laughing. It must be good. It must feel good. You must be recharging. But are you doing exactly what you need in order to be full at the end of it? Maybe, maybe not. But there's going to be a difference in mentality. There's going to be a difference in what we can say, what we can do. Purpose, success, all of those things are going to be dependent on you. Do you know what types of goals you would like to accomplish in your life? Do you know what type of things that you want to work on today? If you don't know, this episode's for you. Today I'm going to be bringing on Gabe DeRita, who's going to be a goal whisperer, but then he also does other things too. He's going to be helping us understand our purpose, our passion, our responsibility to understand ourselves and to understand what works and what doesn't, and to understand where we need to be at a given time. So let's get into the episode with Gabe and myself. Welcome, Gabe DeRita, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
Hey, Michael. I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And today I have you on as a purpose alignment coach. And that is not all you do. I want the world to know that you do so much more than just helping people find their purpose. We can go on about purpose, and people go on about purpose every single day. They say, I want to find my purpose. I got to find my passion. I got to do this. I got to find fulfillment. Do people take it? Maybe, maybe not. But I know the work that you do and what we're going to be talking about today is going to be helping people understand their purpose and maybe something even else that we're going to be talking about. In your own words, can you please tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So my name's Gabe. I actually like to say I'm a goal whisperer first and foremost. That's what I put on my business card because I thought, who's going to take me seriously if I say I'm a life coach, right? But I really help people align with more meaning, make better choices, and really find a path forward that brings them a deeper sense of that purpose, that clarity, that fulfillment that you mentioned. And I also work with organizations and teams to help them do that kind of system-wide by helping them communicate better, resolve conflict more effectively, and find greater resilience in what they're doing in the world.
Yes. And the term life coach is very vague. I mean, Tony Robbins made it big, like, hey, I'm a life coach. On my business cards, it says personal coach because I do so much more than just life coaching. I mean, if you go to my website, you go to my services tab, it's just a plethora of different types of things that you get. And when people, they inquire about coaching with me, they're like, if I coach with you, do I get all this? I go, everything encompasses mindset. And so it's always a surprise when someone begins to work with you and they begin to see your business card and they see that goal whisperer aspect. What is something that they can look forward to?
I love working with people who find themselves in a place of transition in their lives. And that could be, they want to find that next career. Maybe they're leaving a marriage or a long-term relationship, or they're shifting identities into a different community or a part of themselves that's emerging in the world. Those are the people that really light my spark when it comes to coaching. And I love working with those folks because they're in that place of possibility. And so when folks step into working with me, that's the place that I want to spend most of our time, is really exploring that living, growing edge of them, that part of them that feels like it's kind of calling from the other side of the fog, but it's still a bit of a mystery of how to get there. That's the place that I love to start, is because that uncertainty means that the old version of you is kind of stepping away, and there's this kind of warm liquid goo phase, right? That's in between who you were and who you're becoming. And so that's where I think really powerful transformation work starts.
Yeah, people are malleable at that stage where they can become anything that they want to become. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to even find out, well, what is their true purpose or passion in life? They might have created an identity that is not true to who they should be becoming. We might marry the wrong person. We might be in the wrong career. How do you help people start to find their true purpose, or maybe step away from something that they have been living that's not conducive to where they would like to be in their life?
Yeah, I like how you said that. It's climbing the wrong mountain, right? And we may go half our lives realizing that. And I work with a surprising number of folks who are later in their career and just realizing this for the first time. So it's never too late to start that process. And when I first encounter folks who are in that period of transition, the place that's easiest to start in aligning with purpose is taking a look at your values and doing a really honest inventory of your values. What's in alignment? What's out of alignment? Where do those numbers like that kind of match up? And giving people a chance to articulate it is interesting, because the tricky thing about values, they're not aspirational. These are things that are guiding your behaviors here and now in the present, whether they're named or not. And I often have really surprising conversations with people where they say like, oh, I'm like, my value is honesty, right? And then I say, well, have you ever made a hard choice, maybe to be dishonest with somebody to get something you wanted? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, so then what's the true alignment there with that value? Are you willing to make a sacrifice for that value? Do you have places in your life where you're not honoring a value, where you're really triggered by something? Maybe people always being late triggers you a lot, and that points to a value being stepped on. So getting curious with those pieces first and foremost can help people build a path to greater alignment by understanding, okay, if I make these choices in a different way to be in greater alignment with what I value, my life is going to start to feel differently as I live into it. And I also used a really powerful concept that's borrowed from a Japanese philosophy called ikigai. I don't know if you've heard this, but for your listeners who might not have heard of it, it's been westernized into this kind of 4-quadrant Venn diagram, which is what the world needs, what you love, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. And when I started my journey into coaching and facilitation, that was a big part of what I used to get greater alignment, because I realized I was living only for what I could be paid for. The world didn't need another app. You know what I mean? I was in tech sales, and I did very little of what I loved and what I really felt like was driving my passion. And so using a tool like Ikigai to just kind of map your life and say, like, what quadrant am I in? And what would I need to do to shift a little bit towards something that I'm missing can be a great place to start as well.
Yeah, I love that book. And that book is a must read for anyone who is trying to find purpose or trying to understand their life a little bit better. It does give some great guidance in how we can begin to live our life with a little bit more purpose. I know for me, when I started off in college, I thought about the money. I said, well, what's going to make the most money, right? Oh, I was going to do business finance, do accounting, right? That's going to make more money than me being a teacher, which I ended up choosing being a teacher over the money. But that was something that not many people would do. A lot of people will say, well, I'm going to choose the money. I'm going to go into this career. They find themselves in a cubicle 4 or 5 years later and unhappy. They just go through that life because maybe now they have a family and a kid to feed and raise and put a roof over their head and clothes on their body. So it's like we get all these responsibilities so quick that we can't pivot anymore. Not saying that we can't pivot. It's just that we give ourselves that idea. Well, I have all these responsibilities and all this stuff that I need to take care of. It causes people to say, well, this is my only path, where they become so singular in how they live rather than looking at the different types of options. Why do you think people, they get that type of mindset where they can only see what path they're on right now than all the other abundant paths that they have in front of them?
Yeah, I encounter a lot of people who feel like they have that kind of really fixed mindset, or that they don't have an option. And what I invite them to get curious about is the role that they're playing, and if that role has been assigned to them or if they chose that role. And look at the different roles they're playing in their lives and the different characters that they are. Their role as spouse, their role as husband, their role as, VP, their role as poker player, whatever they're doing, right? They're somebody for someone else in their life, but who are they for themselves? What's the role that they want to be for who they are? And that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to get divorced and run away and join the circus either. It could just be as simple as like, am I showing up for myself in a role that I've chosen, in something that I feel good about, instead of just going through these motions because of the circumstances of my life demand it. And that can really be illuminating for people, where they say like, wow, I didn't choose this role, or I don't like how I'm playing it. And I want to really change how I'm showing up to my life in that way. And you mentioned earlier, purpose is this kind of, it almost sounded like the singular concept, the way you mentioned it. Like you have just one thing that you're supposed to do. And I think we can express purpose and meaning in so many different ways. I heard this quote, I think it's from Susan Sontag. She was asked about her choice not to become a mother. And she said, love has other work to do in the world. And, like love doesn't have to look like being a mother or being a wife or whatever. Love has all of these ways it can express itself. And I think of purpose the same way. So you can find all of these different ways to find your work, to find that purpose, if you're willing to be curious and flexible in how you show up. And maybe some of those stories that you think like, oh, it has to look like quitting your job and becoming a life coach or something like that. It doesn't. It doesn't need to be like that. So really interrogating those roles and those stories, and how much of that is internalized from the outside, and maybe you've adopted and it's just become canon almost subconsciously, versus things that you've truly discovered for yourself and built your own meaning around. As maybe I'd invite people to look there first.
Yeah, the same thing with success, because success is going to be individualized to the person. What success is for me might be different than what success is for you or for someone else. What is really success, or what really is purpose? Because we can say, well, purpose is having this house or having this car or having this type of family, or you have to have this amount of love or this type of love where your spouse should be your best friend and it should be your most intimate partner. I mean, it might not be that way in your mind. So we get to choose, right? What is love? What is success? What is purpose? And I think so many people, they get confused with what society tells them, with what is going on in the world, maybe what their parents told them. I mean, even for me, like my mom, when I told her I was going to be a teacher, she gave me like a dirty look. She was like, what? You're going to be what? A teacher? They don't make no money.
Gosh. You should have seen the look I got when I told my family I was going into life coaching. I can resonate.
And so what had happened was, it was something that they weren't used to, right? Oh, this person's following their passions, their ideals for what they want to accomplish in the world. We only have one life. And I think sometimes people think, well, I'm just going to live like how everyone else is thinking. That's why so many people have the same house or they have the same things. It's because they try to keep up with the Joneses. So it's like, okay, well, they got this car. I have to get this car. Maybe get it like a few extra features. So I get the extra tires and the rims, and maybe I get like a spoke or whatever. So like you're doing all the bells and whistles just to get ahead. But our priorities are not where they should be. When we start to look at our priorities, right? So we understand our values. We understand that purpose is going to be individualized. And I know the work that you do, you help people find that purpose and to set their goals that are going to be conducive to that. But when we start to look at the individual, is there a certain aspect of a person? For example, do they have to be a leader? Do they have to be a follower? Do they have to be someone who understands what a value is or understand their worth? What type of person is needed in order to understand that there's a bigger picture in their life?
I think anybody can do that for themselves. And I think that how I would answer that question, I would bring us back to a little bit of a earlier thing you said, where it's about keeping up with the Joneses or these other elements that society's putting in on you. And I think that somebody who's a true leader in their life is somebody who gives themselves permission to create their own definitions and their own sense of choice in what they want from their life. And I think anybody can do that. I think a lot of us are conditioned out of it, but humans have these interesting contradictory needs. We have a need for novelty and we have a need for certainty. The way that those needs interact kind of determines how you view your choices in the world, and whether you're somebody who just like, I don't wants to follow, or somebody who wants to lead, and getting curious about that balance within yourself. Like, am I making choices that favor certainty or novelty and getting a sense of how you show up? And does that align with what you want? And then slowly creating patterns of behavior and change and mindset shifts that allow you to build a different template for interacting with your life. But I really think it starts with that sense of permission. Do I have permission to define this for myself? Do I have permission to take a risk? Do I have permission? What are you giving yourself permission to do and to believe? Because ultimately, what you won't do anything you don't think is possible, right? You have to expect something of yourself first. And that's the trickiest part, because that's all based on a lot of assumptions and internalized permissions that you've given yourself. And that sort of defines your horizons. So I think anybody's capable of it. What you bring to the table, your origin story, your socialization, your background, that all has a lot to do with how you show up to that project and where you start. I was lucky. I got a real big head start with that. As a healthy white man in America, I had a pretty big head start on the permission project, right? So I had a lot of privilege there. But that doesn't mean that somebody who doesn't share that background can't do the same thing.
You said something interesting, and I want you to break it down a little bit further for us. You said we are conditioned out of leadership. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how that happened and who did it to us?
Oh man, this is going to get dangerously close to a rant here. So stop me if I go too far. But I just don't think that the system we're in it favors people being kind of quiet consumers, frankly, right? Like we're in a world that's built to drive demand and insecurity, because fear is ultimately what makes you purchase more stuff. You think you need it, so you want it. You shouldn't go out of your way, right? You should just take what's given to you. And I think that's the larger social architecture that we've been put into as human beings. I don't think there's like a cabal of Illuminati at the top that designed it and is pulling the puppet strings or anything. I think it's just how the market functions. It's like you're sort of conditioned to believe you lack something, and buying this thing will fix that lack for you. And so there is a certain amount of want built into the system. Somebody who's self-reliant isn't a good consumer. And so that's not the dominant sort of social trend that each of us are exposed to. And I think to kind of get curious about it internally is in a way a radical act, because even though it's, I'm totally reliant, like on my refrigerator and my toilet and all of these things, right? But that conditioning enters our subconscious and our psyche too. And so it takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize. I know you had a recent guest on here talking about like awareness, right? And that's a key tool in this process, being more present to the ways that conditioning around creature comforts has also influenced you psychologically as well. It could be a radical act to do that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a rabbit hole. And it could lead to rants on so many different types of systems that we have and that are not helpful for people. But the problem that I see is that we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to see things in perception. For example, growing up, my dad, he was an alcoholic, right? He knows that. I had the choice as a man. I could choose to follow in his footsteps, or I could say, you know what, I don't want that for my life. Right now, we live in a world where people, they have that same type of path. They can choose to follow, not be a leader, or they can say, you know what, I don't like where this is going, and say, well, I can be a leader, right? That type of mindset is more so perception, right? Or maybe conditioning. You were right. Like we are conditioned to believe in a certain way or to think in a certain way. How do we get out of that? Like there's just so many methods and so many options a person can do. But to go against the grain is almost like, am I willing to go this path alone? And so many people, they are dependent on being liked, to being accepted. I mean, 2 out of 3 Americans have low self-esteem. So that means 1/3 of you probably listen to this right now are going to say, well, I'm going to challenge something. And the rest of you are going to say, well, this is just the way it is. How do we get out of that mindset of saying this is just the way it is?
You mentioned a couple things that I want to touch on. The first is that, we have this sort of need for safety, dignity, and belonging, right? This need to be liked by others. And the belief that if we're not liked by others, that we're doing it alone. You're never doing it alone. It might feel that way. Maybe when you're breaking away from the community that you've been socialized into and that's keeping you small or keeping you safe. When you take the risk to break out of that, you do feel alone, but I promise you that you're not. There's somebody else who's going through that same thing, who's going through that same transition. And I like to believe that what you're seeking is seeking you to some degree. So that space you're creating by stepping into the unknown is making room for what's going to serve you deeper. And so remembering that you're not alone and that so many of us have challenges in common, even if social media doesn't look like it, it says everybody's got their life together. It isn't true. And so it encouraged somebody in that position to really find the community that resonates with them, to listen for the people who are telling their story, right? Maybe a step or two down the path. Those tracks are still fresh in the snow and they can walk in that direction. You're never alone. I think so many of us have challenges in common, and find people who are honest and open and talking about those challenges, being willing to address them and be vulnerable, and find that community, because I guarantee you they're out there. And the other thing that you mentioned is a willingness to recognize what's working and to shift the pattern. So you gave the example of your father. Your story in relationship with your father is the same as my father's relationship with his. And I was really lucky to grow up with a healthy masculine presence in my life and a father who chose not to deal with his problems in the same way that his did, because he wanted his kids' lives to be better. And so he's a mentor for me in that regard. And we encourage people to look for that mentor, to look for that leader, to look for that figure who can provide inspiration and guidance and a different way of being in the world to really show, hey, this is possible. I don't have to use the same tools around me that I grew up with to solve the challenges of my life.
Yeah, it's important for us to understand our upbringing and to understand our parents' upbringing too. Because, for example, my dad didn't have a dad. He was raised by his mom alone. For me to recognize that, to say, well, he didn't even know how to be a man. He had to learn how to be a man. So there was a lot of mistakes that he made, and I could see those mistakes. So I now make less mistakes. I mean, if we just look at the Black community for a second, I mean, like, we are a community that has a broken home, right? We have single mothers, and they're raising boys or girls or whoever, right? But they're doing it by themselves, right? We do have to do a better job at that, at keeping that family dynamic together. Again, we look around and we see what's happening and we say, well, they did it, right? Well, guess what? Just because they did it doesn't mean you have to do it, right? There's 2% of the people in the world, achieve wild success. You look at everyone else, and there's 98% of people, everyone else is doing it, right? So I don't have to be as successful. I don't have to show up in my day. So people don't show up in their day. You said something great. We need to surround ourselves with a community of people, right? What would happen if we became leaders ourselves and we decided to join a community of leaders and we just cohabitated with these mindsets of a leadership mentality?
I think that's super important for people who are seeking transformation in their lives. And it doesn't need to be even physically, right? I mean, obviously, if you're in a dangerous situation at home or in a really counterproductive relationship, you're not going to grow past those limitations if you don't get out of that situation. But I like to think of keeping the company of authors, for example, or great thinkers, right? That's somebody you're spending time with. If I'm listening to somebody or reading somebody's work, I'm internalizing that perspective. And so surrounding yourself with good company can be as simple as changing what you consume. Like, unfollow all those like trash meme accounts on Instagram and start finding people who really inspire you and uplift you and give you powerful things to carry into your day. It can be as simple as starting with that. If you think like, oh, I can't move to a new city and get a whole new group of friends overnight, that's true. You're going to need to work towards those goals over time. But you can at least start with surrounding yourself with empowering and inspiring thought leaders, with people who are giving you skills and tools through their knowledge and their wisdom. I think it can be a lot simpler to start that process than people imagine. It doesn't need to be like a complete makeover. Although, if you're doing that and then coming back to a community that's maybe obsessed with their problems or just drinking all the time or not working on themselves, you're ultimately going to find that relationship like naturally sort of separates as you become more and more committed to who you're becoming, and the people around you stay committed to who they were or who you were. It can be hard to keep that relationship as alive, and you need to stay kind of curious to what's aligned for you instead of just saying, nope, this is the only community I've ever had. I can't leave, right? Reinforcing that need for safety and for belonging, and sacrificing your dignity. Because that's what most of us will do when those three core needs, safety, dignity, and belonging. Most people will trade two dignities for one belonging, right? We're talking about the self-esteem thing. They're not all equal. And so most of us are giving away our dignity so we can feel that sense of belonging. And until we recognize that behavior in ourselves, we never give ourselves, again, that permission, right, to make a different choice. And recognize that over time, when we take deeper ownership of our dignity, we will resonate with people differently, and we'll find a community of belonging that recognizes our dignity in a different way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with, we could be the product of what we consume. So if we consume good, positive people, podcasts, books, we are going to become that product. It might not be instant. I don't want people to think they're going to listen to some coaching and session and all of a sudden their life is going to change.
Bam.
I was given a false hope, right? I'm not giving you any false hopes or any false desires. What I'm telling you is that you become the product of what you surround yourself with long term. Think of someone who is going to be consuming just a small dose of poison. It's not deadly, but you're going to start to maybe get some headaches. You're going to start to, maybe have an upset stomach. But if you keep consuming that poison, eventually it's going to kill you. And so we have to look at the realm of, well, what is the difference between the different types of toxins that we can have, right? And not just the toxins that can kill us, right? But the world toxins, right? The toxic things in the world. The way I want to phrase it is, let's say the antidote is personal development. And let's say that the toxic things are going to be trending TikTok videos of people dancing in the middle of Costco. Like, I'm sure they had a great time making that video. And I'm sure people are going to see this video and say, oh my God, you can dance in Costco. This is so great.
right? That content, but does that content bring you anything else, right? Or is it destructive, right? It's keeping you where you are, keeping you still. And eventually, if you just stay still long enough, well, guess what? There's a lot of issues, right? Think of a nursing home or in a hospital. If you just stay sitting in the same spot or stay laying in the same spot, your body starts to like die, right? We need movement. We need to be in constant vibration. And if we are in that mental vibration of, all right, well, I want to be as still as possible, or do I want to make some movement? And typically personal development is talking about how we can add more vibration into our life versus entertainment today, saying how you could be more still in your life. Looking at that aspect, what is your take on the different types of personal development and I guess you could say entertainment type of vibrations in the world?
Yeah, I really love the way you phrased that question and brought in this concept of movement, because we can't help but move. You're moving already, always. You're interacting with the environment. And are you doing that consciously or unconsciously? One of my favorite poets, David Whyte, talks about the invitation, right, that you're making to the world around you, because you're always, always already doing it. And I think of movement with my clients and my own personal growth as thinking about the direction it's going. Are you moving towards something or away from something? And are you framing your entire life as away from, or are you framing your life as towards, right? And so maybe that TikTok video of the Costco thing is away from because it's distracting you. It's pulling you out of your experience. You're dissociating, which can be nice sometimes. I love to tune out and watch cartoons every once in a while to give my brain a break. But if the dominant amount of my movement is all framed as getting away from something in my life, you're framing your entire existence around something you don't want versus framing it around something you do want and looking at how can I move towards the thing that I want more of instead of away from the thing I don't want. And I often have to get people conscious to this directional choice that they're making and how they frame their goals. Because so many of my clients like are framing their entire existence around like the job that they don't want or the marriage that's ruining their lives or whatever it is. They're framing everything in the negative of I don't want that. And of course we need that, right? We can't do away with it. But if it's the only tool in the toolbox, you're going to build your entire ship. Like it's like running a marathon facing backwards, right? Like you're running away from the finish, away from the start instead of towards the finish line. And so really taking a look at that, because you're right, it all is this movement that we're doing. And are we moving towards or away from can be a powerful frame of mind to use to really get curious about your behavior and your goals.
Yeah. And the next I want to talk about like the habits of leadership or the habits of walking toward our purpose rather than walking away from it or being pulled away from it, because everyone is going to have a smartphone nowadays. It's very common, and they would download an app, a game, YouTube, something to distract them, to keep them busy and still. And sometimes they can watch personal development things and they can listen to like something that's going to be helpful where they're going to take some action, or maybe they just needed a break from taking so much action. For example, if you worked a 9 to 5 and you're exhausted when you come home, I'm not saying that you need to go back out and, work another 8 hours and start to get your life back on track. What can you do with the energy that you have? It could be reading a page, reading a poem, making sure your family is good, right? Doing something that's going to recharge you. And I think people have a misconception of what recharges them. They think sitting down, watching some Netflix or some videos is recharging. And I'm not saying that some videos that are not going to be there that are going to recharge you, but the majority of content that people watch is not going to recharge them because they're going to watch one episode, another episode, another episode. Before you know it, it's 2 to 3 hours already doing that. And they're still tired. They're still not ready to do anything. It's just they have that mindset of, I thought this was going to make me be more recharged and more invigorated, but it didn't. I'm exactly the same. I'm actually more tired. I'm ready for bed. How can people start to get that good recharge rather than that bad recharge, and then step into the role of being a leader and to understand those habits?
Yeah, well, you mentioned kind of taking a little bit of a poison every day, right? The difference between a medicine and a poison is the dose. Right. So something that can be good for you in a low dose can be bad for you in a high dose. And like, how good are you at portion control? Can you like stop the next video autoplay on your Netflix after the 30 minutes you said you were going to watch TV instead of going into a 2.5 hour, Tiger King session or whatever it is? It's like, and I love to do that every once in a while, to go watch something to just relax and let my brain consume some entertaining information, but I'm aware of how much of it I'm doing and that there's a point of diminishing returns if I'm just kind of like binging it or going through it unconsciously. And so it's that conscious choice. And again, that awareness of how much of this is good for me. And that's going to be different for everyone, but it requires some practice, some self-awareness, some getting it wrong, some refining it to really decide for yourself what's the right amount of this thing that I'm consuming. And also experimenting with different ways of rest. Maybe, if your job is sitting in front of a computer, rest means a screen Shabbat, like the concept of the Jewish Shabbat, right? Like you just take away the screen for a while, and like your Saturday afternoon is screen free, phone, everything, right? Maybe if your job is being around people all the time in customer service or a coffee shop or front of house, maybe your rest and recharge is like going and sitting by a lake and just listening to ducks talk for an hour because you're done with people for a while. So like, how can you kind of look at your life and what's out of balance and maybe what you need the opposite of to bring some of that recharge in? I think it's a really personal project to define rest for ourselves, right? Because we talked earlier about this conditioning. We're told that rest is not good. We're told that rest is something that, you should only rest to be better at your job when you go back to work, basically. And that's not the point of rest. I read this really beautiful concept. It's a Greek concept. It's called telos, which means goal. And you can have telic and atelic activities. And a telic activity is something that's done for the purpose of a future result, like a goal-oriented thing. So you could say, I need to take my vacation so I can come back and be better at my job. That's kind of like skipping over your vacation and saying the goal of the vacation is being better at work when I get back, versus an atelic activity is something that's done for the sake of itself. A dance is a good example. Nobody dances to get to the end to a certain point of the room, or, nobody listens to a song to get to the end of the piece of music, right? It's something that's designed to be enjoyed of and for itself. So when you're looking at rest, are you doing it for the sake of itself? Or is your rest designed as some kind of low-key telic activity where you're saying, no, I need to just rest and recharge so that I can just cut out the so that, right? Cut that out and say, can I do something for the sake of itself, for the pleasure of its own enjoyment? And take an inventory of how many things you're doing that actually fall into that category of purely for the sake of themselves, or are all the things I'm doing for the sake of some future benefit that I'm hoping to gain? And maybe doing some math, around that and saying, I do need to do more things that are just for themselves, for their own enjoyment, that I find satisfying, that don't have anything to do with other goals in my life. That can really help.
When you were talking, I was just thinking about the aspect of like how there's different types of watts for chargers. So you can have like a 5 watt, a 10 watt, 45 watt, 65 watt, 85 watt. The higher we get in our wattage, faster we're going to recharge. But not every device that we have can recharge at that high, I guess you could say, wattage or charge rate. So if you have an older phone, it won't be able to do that 65 watt charge, right? It's just going to cap at 10. It's like, okay, cool. So understand where you are in life, right? Because I would say like there's different levels to mindset. You might be a go-getter and say, I'm going to go run 10 miles right now. You might say, maybe I'll go around the block, right? There is no wrong way to, approach your start. And I want people to understand that, like, we're not telling you to say, okay, find your purpose, become a leader and do this and, do the right things all the time, right? There's going to be some times when you want to eat some ice cream and sit on the sofa and watch a movie. Go for it, right? If that is what you need, understand that's what you need. And what you were saying exactly that is exactly that. Understand where you need. If you were talking to people all day and you want to go to the lake and go fishing, that is what you need. If you were in front of the computer all day or in front of a screen all day and you just want to go out and get some nature, that is what you need. Or spend time with your family, that is what you need. Everyone's going to need something different. But if you're doing the same things repetitively over and over again, and you're having the same type of results, wouldn't it behoove you to do something a little bit different? Spice it up, switch it up. I know the work that you do is you help people understand their mundane routine or their, I guess you could say, their static way of being. So if they just fall themselves in a rut and they're in this rut, hey, you're in this rut, like, let's get out of it. Do you find that people will give themselves this rut and then not even know that they have it? Or is it something that they know they're in when they come work with you and they want to change it?
I think people who work with me tend to be aware that there's something they want to change. And it doesn't even need to be a rut. It could just be the status quo, right? I don't want to give the implication that just because something is stable in your life that it's bad. I like things that are stable, but they're the right things. They're chosen. And I think that's the difference, is like, are the things around you there by default, or are they there by some conscious intention and choice that you've made to design them that way? Do you live an examined or an unexamined life? This one of my teachers, Sam Harris, talks about the examined life. And I think that's an important concept. But the people who are working with me definitely have had that light bulb moment of like, something's off here. Like, I might want this to be a little bit different, or there are some unexamined status quos in my life that I'd like to change. And maybe I'm not even sure how they got there, but I know that I want something different. And so I do think there's that budding awareness that kind of arises in people. And maybe someone listening is saying like, yeah, I felt that, but I'm nervous about it, or I don't know what it means, or I don't want to deal with the implications of the change that would be required to honor that calling. But ultimately, I think that voice goes away if you don't answer it at a certain point. And everybody has to make that choice for themselves. I definitely had to in my life. I answered that call because I realized I was turning 30 years old and I would never travel the world and live the dream that I had for myself since I was a young kid if I didn't answer that call and make some big sacrifices to do it. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs to go through that hard reset process. But I do think, every once in a while you hear that voice in the background saying like something needs to change, or I'd like this to be different. And it's really, that's the moment when you get to start this process to really choose deeper alignment, to choose purpose. But if you don't hear that voice and you're just kind of like in that place of comfort and conditioning, maybe, you'll stay there for a lifetime. And that might be the way that it goes. But if you do hear that desire, that calling, that voice to make it different, trust that, because that's the deeper part of you telling you meant for more, you meant for something different, and you can build that life. But it's going to take time. It's going to take work. Like you said, you're not going to listen to one episode of this podcast and suddenly be a transformed being, right? It takes just the inspiration and then the action to follow.
I mean, after having this conversation, I'm not sure if that's true anymore, because what you said was wonderful. And it's going to spark a lot of ideas in people, right? They're going to listen to this and they're going to say, well, maybe there is something that I should be looking at. That's going to be that initiative for most people saying, okay, I can make some changes in my life. Where do I begin? The conversation that we had today is just the beginning, because you're going to ask yourself some of the most important questions that you're going to be facing in your life, right? What is your purpose? What type of goal? What type of things you want to accomplish or do? You get to make that action. And again, the work that you do is so important, helping people understand their goals, their purpose, stepping into leadership. If you can, give us any last words, and then please tell the audience where they can find you.
Thanks, Michael. I would encourage folks as they go about this process to not get what I call values envy. Because it's funny that process of comparison can creep in even to this work, right? Where we're constantly comparing ourselves to others. And we've been having a really lofty conversation about transformation and purpose and all of these things. If your life is beautiful the way it is and you like it, you don't have to change it, right? Like it can be good if you love it the way that it is. And this doesn't have to be the grand makeover, right? You don't have to be like buying a new home. Maybe you're just remodeling the bathroom. So giving yourself permission for this to scale up and down and change your life at different kind of degrees, I think is important to name. Because maybe for someone listening, they don't need to go and start from scratch. They just need to make a tiny tweak. And that's still doing it right. Okay. That's still aligned and authentic for you. That's what's most important. So don't want to set the invitation or the bar too high here to say purpose only means these big transformations. It can mean little, small, incremental changes as well that are just as important to leading a meaningful and fulfilling life.
And where can people find you?
Yep. They can find me on the internet in a couple places I like to hang out. My website, effectiveconnection.com, has my story on it, my relationship to purpose and my journey with this work. It also has the stories of some people that I've worked with in the past if folks want to get inspired by others and what they've done. And I like Instagram too. I'm a visual storyteller. I like pictures and words. And so you can find me on Instagram at FunGabe, which is FUNNGABE. And don't be surprised if you see mostly pictures of mushrooms, because I really like foraging and spending time in the woods. And so a lot of my pictures on there are just of mushrooms. But folks can find me on Instagram at FunGabe, on my website at effectiveconnection.com. And I also write on Medium from time to time under the same name, Gabe DeRita. If folks like to read longer format stuff, they can find me there.
Perfect. And I will definitely put those links in the description box below so people can easily find you, follow your socials, check out your long articles so they can get some reading in. And I think that is so important. Reading is so powerful. I know when I began to really dive deep into mindset and to change, I started to read copious amounts of books. I think it's like the 1 year I started reading, I think I read something like over 100 books. And it's almost like an impossible task, but I just fell in love with it because reading changed my life. And I know that the work that you do can change so many people's lives too. And it's important that people take action today. I encourage you to check out Gabe, follow him on his socials, and then to continue to follow the work he does, because we want you to take those small steps. They don't have to be grand yet. Take the small steps, have those small victories, and then understand how life can be good. I want to thank you so much, Gabe DeRita, for coming on Coaching in Session. Great conversation today.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. And I hope to hear from anyone out there that got inspired by our conversation.
All right, everyone. I would like to thank my guest, Gabe DeRita, for coming on Coaching in Session. As you can see, he's going to be helping people find their purpose and alignment in life. The way he does it is going to be through coaching, through mentorship, and through content that's going to help you visualize what is possible in your life. Now, you might be someone who doesn't have lofty goals. You might be someone who just wants to live a low-key life and just barely make it. And I'm not saying that that life is a bad life. You can live in a shack and you can be completely satisfied with how you're living life. This is your life to live. No one can tell you how to live life. The problem with life today is that society tells us how to live life. If you have a shack, you are poor. If you're living in a shack by yourself, you should feel alone. Because guess what? That's not what society is saying. We should be surrounded by a whole bunch of people. We should have a bunch of friends, and we should have a big house with a bunch of stuff so people can come over and they can look at what we have, and then we can be proud that we have all these things and people are jealous that we have it. We are living backwards. And many people, they have these goals and they just don't have any actions with those goals. They don't have any accountability. They don't know how to create the good habits. They don't know how to come home from work and to know what they need because they have this habit of doing what they think is good enough for them or what makes them good enough for tomorrow. Well, I don't want you just to be good enough for tomorrow. I want you to be good enough in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. I want you to be good enough for then. Not just good enough and well rested enough so you can make it through another day of work, so you can make it through another day of struggle. Not saying that our days are not going to be full of struggle. Every day is going to be a challenge. Every day should be a challenge. There's going to be days when you might not want to show up, and that's perfectly fine. Get that well-needed rest. Understand that. Understand that today is a rest day. On Saturday and Sunday, for me, I don't go to the gym. It's not because I'm saying, oh, well, I don't want to go to the gym on Saturday and Sunday. No, they're rest days. Monday through Friday, I'm showing up, and Saturday and Sunday, I'm taking it easy. Yeah, I understand it's the Monday through Friday 9 to 5 type of concept, but that is just what I do when it comes to the gym. But when it comes to work, heck, I'll work 7 days a week because I love what I do. I found the purpose I wanted to fulfill. I'm passionate about the work I do, and I understand that I'm making a difference in the world. And we talked about the 4 areas in Isekai where you can be living life and how to create that purpose. I recommend that book again to anyone who hasn't read it before, or if you want to get the audio, listen to it. That book is going to create some awareness in your life, and you're going to challenge some of the things that you have come to believe. So some of the beliefs might be good ones. Some of the beliefs might be contradicting what you really can do. We're going to have a lot of, I guess you can say, ignorance, because how we grow up, we talked about it in the system, is going to create or that condition for us not to think in the mindset to be a leader, to go after our purpose, or to be more in our life. Because life can be good, we just have to know how to get it. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.